I still remember the sound of that bell over the bookstore door, the kind that rings too brightly for a quiet morning. I was shelving a stack of used paperbacks when it chimed, and her voice followed, steady, low, with that kind of warmth that makes you look up before you know why. "Excuse me," she said. "Do you know anything about old typewriters?" That was the first time I saw her, Clara. Mid-40s, maybe. A linen shirt, sleeves rolled up, faint ink smudge on her wrist. She didn't look like someone who asked for help often. The kind of woman who fixed her own things until she couldn't anymore. Her sister came in right behind her, maybe early 20s, full of motion and chatter. She dropped her bag on the counter, laughing. "He'll know. He looks like the kind of guy who collects weird stuff." I laughed it off, though my ears were burning. "They'd found an old Remington in their late father's attic," Clara said. Her sister wanted to get it working again, for the aesthetic, while Clara just wanted to see it type one more letter. Something about that, about her saying one more, stuck. When they brought it in, the thing looked like it had survived a war. Dust in every key. I pulled up a stool behind the counter and started tinkering while they hovered. Her sister leaned close, trying to see what I was doing. "This part first," she said, playfully pointing to the carriage arm. Then, without meaning to, she perched on the edge of my chair, more out of excitement than anything. For a half second, it was awkward, too close, her hair brushing my shoulder. She laughed, embarrassed, and stood up so fast she almost knocked over a stack of books. Clara just sighed, not annoyed, just quietly amused. "You never did learn patience," she told her sister, the kind of teasing that carries years of history. Then her eyes met mine for a beat too long, and something flickered there. Not jealousy exactly, more like curiosity. The rest of the repair went in fragments. Metal clicks, dust motes drifting through morning light. Her sister scrolling on her phone while I tried to get the ribbon moving again. Clara stayed quiet, arms folded, watching. Every so often, she'd ask something simple, about the mechanism, the ink, the age, but underneath it all, I could tell she wasn't asking about the machine. When I finally got the type bars to move freely, I gestured for Clara to try it. She hesitated before pressing a key, the softest touch, like she was afraid the thing might break under her hands. The letter H stamped faintly on the yellowed page. She smiled, just a corner of her mouth, and looked at me like I'd done something that mattered. Her sister clapped and called it magic, but Clara only nodded, quiet again. She thanked me, voice barely above a whisper, and said they'd come back once they found new ribbon. They left together, the bell chiming again, the air shifting back to stillness. I found myself staring at the empty space where they'd stood. The chair still held the faintest warmth, and on the counter, Clara had left one of her rings, silver, thin, forgotten beside a stack of receipts. I turned it over in my palm. Just a simple band, no engraving. And somehow, for the rest of the day, I couldn't stop hearing her voice, that low, steady tone. "Say, do you know anything about old typewriters?" She came back 3 days later, holding the box like it might fall apart in her hands. The bell over the door gave that same bright chime, too loud for the quiet afternoon. "I found the ribbon," she said. "Thought I'd try my luck again." Her sister wasn't with her this time. Clara's hair was tied back now, and there were faint shadows under her eyes, not from makeup, but from the kind of tired that doesn't sleep off easily. She looked different alone, less composed maybe, or maybe just realer. I cleared a space on the counter. "You're getting pretty serious about this thing." "I suppose I am." She smiled faintly. "It's strange how something broken makes you care more than you expect." I wasn't sure if she meant the typewriter. While I threaded the new ribbon, she leaned against a nearby shelf, thumbing through an old poetry book. I could hear the paper whispering between her fingers, the tiny click of her ring against the page. She read one line out loud under her breath, not realizing I was listening. Something about letters never sent. When she noticed me looking, she closed the book too fast. "I talk to myself sometimes," she said, half embarrassed. "Yeah, I do too," I said. "Helps the gears turn." That earned me a quiet laugh. Just one short sound, but it carried. I realized then that I'd been waiting for her to laugh. We worked side by side for a while. I explained how the ribbon spooled, how to keep the keys from jamming. She nodded, serious, every so often biting her lip as she tried to follow what I was saying. I liked the way she asked questions, precise, curious, no wasted words. But every now and then, she'd drift off, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. "Sorry," she said once, catching herself. "You were saying about the escapement lever," I said. "It's fine. You just looked far away for a second." She looked down at the machine, fingers tracing the cold metal. She murmured. "Old habits." There was a pause. A long one. Only the hum of the ceiling fan filled the space. When she finally spoke again, her tone softened. "It's odd, isn't it? How you can miss someone you didn't even like that much." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Sometimes silence is safer than answers. She took a deep breath, as if realizing she'd said too much, and straightened up. "Anyway, how's it looking?" I pressed a key to test the ribbon. The E stamped clean and dark. "Looks alive again." Something passed between us then, not quite a smile, not quite gratitude. Just a flicker of something she didn't want to name. She packed up the typewriter carefully, thanked me again, and reached for her bag. Her hand brushed mine. Barely, but enough to stop her for a breath. We both froze, eyes meeting in that half-second of hesitation. Then she pulled away first. The bell rang as she left, but the sound felt different this time. Sharper, thinner. Like the moment had stretched too long before snapping back. I watched her cross the street through the window, the wind lifting her hair, sunlight catching the silver ring she'd retrieved from the counter. And for reasons I still can't explain, I found myself smiling, quietly, stupidly, as if I'd just been trusted with a secret I wasn't supposed to hear. The rain started around 6, steady, thin at first, then harder. The kind that makes the air hum. I was locking up the shop when she appeared in the doorway again, umbrella dripping, typewriter case in hand. "Sorry," she said, breath uneven. "I think it's jammed again." I was nearby. She wasn't nearby. The nearest bus stop was 10 minutes away. But I didn't say that. "Come in," I told her. "You'll get soaked." The lights inside were half off. The place felt different in the evening. Softer, quieter, the air heavy with paper and rain. She shook out her umbrella, water scattering across the floor, and set the box on the counter. "Can I stay a minute?" she asked. "Until it lets up." "Of course." She perched on the stool while I checked the machine. Her hair clung to her neck, damp from the walk. I try not to look too long. "It's the spacebar," I said after a while. "You probably pressed too hard." She smiled faintly. "Story of my life." I laughed, though it didn't sound like me. Something about her being here, after hours, made the room feel smaller. The ceiling fan turned lazily above us, the rain filling the silence between words. "Do you ever write?" she asked suddenly. "Not really," I said. "I start things and don't finish." She tilted her head. "You sound like a writer." "Why's that?" "Because you notice people." I didn't know what to do with that. I felt my chest tighten, not unpleasantly. I wanted to ask what she'd noticed about me, but the question caught in my throat. "Instead," I said, "you seem like someone who used to." She blinked. "Used to what?" "Right." Her lips parted. Not a smile, not surprise, something else. Then she looked down, tracing the typewriter keys with her fingertips. "I did. A long time ago. Before everything got complicated." The thunder rolled softly outside. The kind that feels close but doesn't strike. She kept her hand on the keys, motionless now. "It's strange," she said quietly. "Sometimes I think about how much of my life I lived trying not to be noticed." I looked at her. Really looked. There was a tremor in her voice. Not weakness. More like fatigue that had nowhere else to go. "You're not invisible," I said, before I could stop myself. She laughed once, brittle, surprised. "Careful," she said. "You'll ruin my reputation." I smiled, but the air between us felt heavier than before. She was still watching me, eyes unreadable. For a moment, I thought she might say something real, something that would change the shape of the room. But then her phone buzzed on the counter. She flinched, glanced at the screen, and turned it face down. A pause too long to ignore. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just old noise," she said, shaking her head. "Someone who still thinks he gets a say." The words hung there, soft but sharp. She reached for her bag, like the conversation had reached its limit. I should go before it stops raining, she said. It's easier to walk in the noise. I nodded, though every part of me wanted her to stay. She moved to the door, stopped for a second, then turned back. You're kind, she said. That's not nothing. And then she was gone, her umbrella opening against the wind, the bell giving one last tired ring. For a moment, I thought about running after her, saying something, anything, but I didn't. I just stood there, watching the rain smear her outline into the dark, her words still hanging in the space she'd left behind. It had been 2 weeks since the storm. 2 weeks since the sound of her voice had slipped into every quiet part of my days. She hadn't come by. I told myself it was fine, that maybe she'd found someone else to fix the typewriter, that maybe she didn't need another reason to linger in a dusty bookshop. But every time the bell over the door rang, I still looked up. Then one night, she did. No umbrella this time. Just the same linen shirt, hair loose, eyes tired in that way I remembered. She didn't bother with a smile. Are you closing? She asked. Not yet. Good. She didn't bring the typewriter. Just herself. That's how I knew something was different. We didn't talk for a while. She stood near the philosophy section, pretending to read, and I pretended to wipe down the counter. The air between us had weight. Not tension exactly, but something that hummed, something unspoken and waiting. Finally, she turned, voice low. You didn't ask why I stopped coming. I met her eyes. I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to. Her mouth curved. Not a smile, more like an acknowledgement. You're too decent for your own good. I don't think that's true. Then what are you? She asked. To me, I mean. I keep thinking I should stop coming here. That it's not fair. To who? I asked quietly. She didn't answer. She walked closer, stopped just a few feet away. The space felt impossibly small. You're young, she said finally, shaking her head. You don't know what people will say. People don't know anything. That's the problem, she said, almost laughing. They don't have to. Her hands were trembling, and she hid them by crossing her arms. I could see her fighting herself, every word careful, rehearsed, breaking anyway. I tell myself this is nothing, she said. A small place, good company, harmless conversation. But then I leave and I can't shake it off. I think about how quiet it feels in here. How you look at me like I'm still someone. Her voice cracked on the last word. Not loud, just enough to cut the air. I don't know what to do with that, she said. I wanted to say something back, something steady, something that would ease the ache in her voice, but all I managed was her name. Just her name, small and useless in the space between us. She let out a breath that sounded like surrender. What are we doing? She whispered. The silence that followed was unbearable, too full, too sharp. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking, the sound of the rain gutter outside dripping steady as a pulse. I took one small step closer, not enough to touch, just enough that she could feel the warmth of another person there. Her eyes met mine, glassy, tired, searching. For a second, she looked like she might lean in, but then she didn't. Instead, she said softly, You remind me of the person I promised myself I'd never need. And with that, she turned away, slow, deliberate, like walking through something heavy, leaving only the echo of that line in the quiet room. A week passed before I saw her again, long enough that I started convincing myself she wouldn't come back at all. Then, one gray afternoon, she walked in, no warning, no greeting, holding a small envelope. I thought you might know what to do with this, she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes looked restless. The envelope was creased, handled too many times. I took it gently, turning it over in my hands. The paper smelled faintly of dust and perfume. There was no name, just a faint blue ink smudge where one had been wiped away. What is it? I asked. A letter I found inside the typewriter, she said. I think my father wrote it. Maybe to my mother. Or to someone else entirely. He never sent it. She sat down, the stool scraping softly against the floor. I thought about reading it. Then I thought maybe I shouldn't. I waited, letting the silence hold. Would you? She asked. Read it, I mean. I can't decide if I want to know. Her eyes flicked toward me, wary, hopeful. I opened the envelope slowly. The handwriting was thin, careful, leaning forward like it was trying to reach someone it had no right to. Clara, it began. I froze. It's addressed to you. I said quietly. Her breath hitched, but she didn't move. To me, I turned the paper so she could see. Her name, right there in blue ink. She leaned closer, hands trembling slightly. He must have written it years ago, she whispered. Before she stopped herself. Before everything fell apart. I didn't read the rest aloud. Just handed it to her, watching her eyes move over the words. She smiled once, then bit her lip, and I knew whatever was written there wasn't easy. When she finished, she folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. He wrote about regret, she said. Said he was sorry for not being the kind of father who could listen. Said he hoped one day I'd find someone who would. She looked at me then, long enough that it didn't feel like looking anymore, more like remembering. That's why this feels wrong, she said softly. Because maybe he was right. And I hate that. Her words sank into the room like dust. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, just exhaled, long and shaky, like she'd been holding that letter in her chest her whole life. I don't know what to say, I admitted. You don't have to. She smiled faintly, eyes unfocused. You've already been saying it. The rain started again outside, not hard, just steady, tapping against the window like a metronome for the moment. She stood, smoothed her coat, and picked up the envelope. I think I came here to remember something, she said. I just didn't expect it to remember me back. As she turned to leave, I reached out instinctively, not to stop her, just to steady the air between us. Clara, I said. She stopped, waiting. What did the letter end with? I asked. She looked down at it, fingers brushing the flap. Then she whispered, almost to herself. He said, if someone ever looks at you and listens at the same time, don't run. She looked up once more, half smiling, half breaking. I wish he hadn't written that, she said. Because now I can't stop hearing it. The days blurred after that. I kept opening the shop, same time every morning, same quiet hum of dust and paper. But it felt like waiting now, not for her exactly, but for the moment she might finally stop pretending she wouldn't return. When she did, it was near closing again. Dusk leaking through the blinds, the streetlights flickering to life. She held no envelope, no typewriter, just herself, calm, but fragile around the edges. You still open? She asked. For you, yeah. She gave a tired smile at that, stepped inside, and locked the door behind her. A small sound, that click, and the outside world stayed where it belonged. For a while, we didn't talk. She wandered the aisles, fingertips brushing the spines of old books. I could tell she wasn't reading the titles, just grounding herself. The air was heavy but not uncomfortable, like both of us knew the words had already been spoken somewhere between the silence. Finally, she came to the counter, leaned on it, and said, I reread the letter. I nodded. Yeah, I think I understand it now. She looked at me, eyes soft. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was warning me not to build walls so high that no one could see in. I waited. And now, she said quietly, I don't know how to unbuild them without losing the pieces that kept me safe. She said it without breaking eye contact. That was new. No deflection, no half-smile to hide behind. Just truth. I stepped around the counter, slow enough for her to stop me if she wanted. She didn't. We stood there, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could see the faint tremor in her breath. You don't have to lose them, I said. You just don't have to hide behind them anymore. Her eyes flickered. Surprise, maybe gratitude, maybe something harder to name. You make it sound simple. It's not, I said. But neither is pretending. We stayed like that for a long time. The street outside was empty, rain starting again, a soft, steady rhythm against the glass. The kind of sound that fills silence without erasing it. Eventually, she sat on the stool by the counter. I stayed standing beside her. We didn't look at each other, but the air felt steady now, like something had finally settled. I kept waiting for this to go wrong, she said, voice almost a whisper. For me to say the wrong thing, or for you to see the wrong version of me. I already saw her, I said. You're still here. That made her laugh, small, quiet, real. She looked up, and I saw the reflection of the rain in her eyes, tiny and shifting. Then, without speaking, she reached out. Her hand found mine, just rested there, fingers barely touching. No pull, no tension, just stillness. A simple acknowledgement that everything had already been said. The rain softened. The clock ticked once. And she whispered, not as a confession, but as a fact, "I don't know what happens next." I squeezed her hand once, just enough. "Neither do I said. "But I think that's the point." She smiled then, faint, tired, unguarded. And we stayed like that, two people in the small quiet of a closing shop, the kind of silence that finally meant peace. It's been months now. The bookstore still smells like paper and rain, but the quiet doesn't feel heavy anymore. It's just quiet, the kind that lets you think without turning thoughts into ghosts. She still comes by sometimes. Not often, and never with the typewriter. Just for coffee, or a book she swears she won't finish, or to drop off something small, a ribbon, a photo, a question she doesn't need answered. We talk sometimes. Other days we just share space. People think connection comes from what you say, but I've learned it's the opposite. It's what you don't say that builds the bridge, the half sentences, the pauses, the things you both understand without proof. That's what stays. She told me once, not long ago, "You changed the way I remember him." I didn't ask how. I just nodded. Because I think that's what this became, not a story about us, but about what we repaired in each other without realizing it. And me, I stopped waiting for things to declare themselves. Not everything worth keeping needs a name. Some feelings just need time, and a place to sit quietly until they stop asking to be explained. The funny thing is, love, whatever kind we found, didn't arrive like a spark. It happened the way dusk turns to night. You look up one moment and realize it's already there, soft, surrounding, asking nothing. I still remember that first day, the bell above the door, her voice asking if I knew anything about old typewriters. I didn't know much then. I know a little more now, about gears, about timing, about how easily things jam when you force them. Sometimes, when the shop's empty, I bring out that old Remington. The ribbon still smudges ink in uneven lines. I type a few words, mostly nonsense, just to hear the rhythm. There's a key that always sticks, the H, and every time it does, I think of her smile the first time it worked again. She told me she keeps her father's letter on her nightstand. Said it reminds her not to run from being seen. I guess that's what we both learned. That being seen isn't the same as being exposed. It's being known, without needing to defend yourself. That's the thing about slow connections. They don't burn out. They hum quietly in the background, like the sound of rain against glass, still there, even when you stop noticing. I don't know if this was love. Maybe it was something quieter, something steadier. But it mattered. And sometimes, that's enough. So if you're still here, listening, reading, feeling something you can't quite name, maybe that's the point too. Not to understand it, just to let it stay. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?